when you're driving Tesla, you are on autopilot. The car can do everything for you, but you are in control all the time. If the car is changing the lane, you can ask the car not to change the lane. So every time you do not have to throw a new pattern to the user. So the user feels grounded. They can predict what happens next. And always, I feel, always give control back to the users. And I think Thesis is also a great tool that you can start with. They have two product lines. One is C1 and Canvas. I think you can start with that. It's very intuitive and it's very product managers, product designers, or engineers focused. Everybody.
Welcome to an exciting new episode of Why Involve. Today, we have a truly dynamic personality joining us, someone who blends tech, creativity, and vision in everything she does. Let's welcome Khyati Brahmabhat, Senior Product Manager at Apti. Khyati leads the design and development of AI-powered digital adoption solutions for global enterprises. At the forefront of product innovation, she is currently spearheading initiatives around generative UI or Gen UI, the next evolution of adaptive, intelligent, and context-aware interfaces. With a unique blend of technical expertise and artistic flair, Khyati has built and launched products across multiple industries. She has mentored early-stage startups, guided aspiring project managers, and written extensively about conversational AI, UX, and the future of interface design. Her viral article on Gen UI has been reshared widely as a guiding lens on how AI is transforming the way we interact with software. Outside her product leadership, interestingly, she is also a theater artist, poetess, cake designer, and former radio host, infusing every product she builds with empathy, clarity, and a touch of magic. She actively contributes to the tech community via eChai Ventures and frequently speaks about human-centered design in an AI-driven world. So let's dive into her journey and explore how she is reimagining user interfaces with Gen UI and beyond. Welcome to the Why Involve podcast, Khyati. So you have often described interfaces as being intelligent co-pilots. So can you explain what that really means and how the Gen UI plays into this vision?
Yeah, sure. I think whenever I say co-pilot or intelligent co-pilot as UI that understands what I'm trying to do, it basically helps me in getting there faster. It's about surfacing the most relevant actions in the moment. So for me, intelligent co-pilot means the interface isn't just reacting, but it's helping. It understands where the user is trying to do, and it supports that flow instead of making the user dig through multiple tabs or buttons or some irrelevant data that we throw at them. So an intelligent co-pilot doesn't just replace the user; it makes sure that they are not flying blind. And in most enterprises today, you might have observed that user is still doing all the thinking on their own. The UI just gives them the control, but there is no direction for them. So the assumption is you figure out what you need to do and we will be here once you're done. So based on, for example, maybe 5 personas, there are some possible flows that or paths that we have figured out, and user can take one of them and pick one of them. So the persona-based static user journeys are not good enough anymore, I feel. And that's when Gen UI adds more here, and because of the ability to infer the context. Now the system, if you look at the user behavior, the past interactions, the role, the time of the day, and then they all start making decisions like, here is what matters to you right now. So, and then let's bring that forward for you. So instead of giving you a menu, UI gives you a momentum. So let's take a basic example of a manager who logs into the system during the last week of the month. Now in this case, Gen UI might know that there is a review session going on, and there are 3 main important tasks that most likely manager is supposed to take the action on. So instead of showing them the same home page every time, it will basically show them the most relevant task for them at that time. So Gen UI shows the most relevant actionable UI to them. And that's not magic. It's actually more helpful. And this is where the Gen UI is headed. So from interface that don't wait for your input, but they offer the assistance based on your inference. So now it's all about outcome driven design thinking. So we are not just building softwares or interfaces that listens to just clicks. Now we are building softwares that listen to the intent and then acts upon it.
That's really interesting. So is it the end of so-called static interfaces?
I wouldn't say just end off the static interfaces, but we are definitely moving away from static interfaces.
So what is Gen UI, and why is it called a paradigm shift in how we interact with software now?
Yeah, so I would say in simple terms, Gen UI refers to the interfaces that are created or modified dynamically and in real time based on the user intent or a behavior or context. Now, going forward, UI, as we are discussing, is no longer static. It's a system that is deciding how to show, when to show, and based on which signals it is detecting. So, to understand why this matters, let's zoom out a little bit. We have already seen the shift with adaptive UI, where interfaces were responded to the screen sizes, the user roles, and the device, right? That's when we started seeing that if you're an admin, show this. If you're a new user, then show that. But that was still rule-based. Now, generative UI takes this even further. With AI, we can now infer the intent and not just the identity. And that's why the dynamically generated and the right interfaces, they generate on the fly.
But because of the evolving UI based on the user interactions, do you think it will be more unpredictable for the user, or will it be what he really needs?
Yeah, so predictability also comes with a lot of other things, right? That's what I was going with this. Now we are designing the system for outcomes. We are not designing the systems to optimize number of clicks or to optimize the flow. Now that outcome can be this clarity or completion or adaptability. And how we define that outcome is also very important with Gen UI. So now this better outcome you define, the better user experience you will provide. And predictability also comes from the guardrails. So what kind of guardrails we are putting in place when you are designing this intent model is also important. So that, user does not feel frustrated that what is happening? Why am I seeing this?
Yeah, it is likely. So in that case, how do you handle automation and personalization, user control without, really overwhelming the user or frustrating him?
I think it's a very valid and very great point. Everybody who is thinking about Gen AI right now, they are thinking about automation and predictability and everything. But let's understand this. Automation isn't the enemy, right? It's unexplained automation is, or maybe unnecessary automation is the problem. So as long as the automation is there to reduce the friction and not remove the control, it's a great help for the users. And that's where when I think about any kind of automation or predictability, there are 4 things I always mention is automate what is repetitive. And let's not assume anything when we are automating. So just because what user did something 3 times does not mean that we just go ahead and automate that for the 4th time. Also, when you're thinking about personalizing it, personalize what matters, but show your reasoning. If UI is basically adapting to the intent or the logic that you have built, tell the user why they are seeing this difference, so that they can relate. Okay, because this happened, or maybe because of my user behavior, this is what has changed. And also keep this user interaction patterns also consistent. So every time you do not have to throw a new pattern to the user. So the user feels grounded. They can predict what happens next. And always give control back to the users, because let the user override the automation also. Like they can freeze the views, they can undo the suggestions, they can choose the default mode. So the user always feels in control. And as I said, users don't mind change. What they mind is unexplained change. So let the user be part of this entire loop. And I always give this, my favorite example is basically Tesla. When you're driving Tesla, you are on autopilot. So yeah, the car can do everything for you, but you are in control all the time. If the car is changing the lane, you can ask the car not to change the lane. If it's giving signal or to go left, but you want to go right, you can always do that. You can always change the GPS directions also. So as long as the user feels in control and user has trust in the system, they don't mind predictability or the automation.
What's a practical first step for teams who want to start experimenting with Gen UI today? And are there any tools or platforms they can begin using?
Yeah, for that, for all the teams that I would say, the moment we start talking about Gen UI, the first instinct goes to what kind of LLMs I should use, what happens to the SDK, what kind of
And there are so
infrastructure I
many of
should
them.
build.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there are so many, and it's confusing. But I would say, with the moment you start thinking about Gen UI, the first simple and basic step is start understanding the user intent first. If you don't know what your users are trying to accomplish in this specific moment, then no system, generative or otherwise, will solve that for you. So start small, I would say. Pick one use case where users' goal diverge based on the context. So, for example, let's take onboarding. I think it's a great example to start with. Map how the flow should look for the first time users versus the returning users. So, for an analyst or a manager, how this flow will look like. And then ask yourself, why are you forcing everyone to use the same UI? What should be different and at what point? Once you've identified that variation that makes sense, you can begin exploring on how to bring it in adaptability. And this is where the Gen UI becomes useful. It allows you to shift from this hard-coded flows to basically conditional experiences that adapt based on your content and intent. There are a lot of tools out there, and there are a lot of teams also who are working on that. So I would say start with intent tooling, define the intent libraries, use the lightweight generation engine or a model that adapts to the interfaces in real time. And again, as I said, not everything should be automated, or not everything can be automated. Not everything is magic also, but UI becomes more aligned with users' actual goal in the moment with generative UI. So generative UI isn't a full rebuild that you need to go through, or it's not the entire shift and everything that you need to go start thinking about. But in terms of the tools, if you're early in the in this, then just prototype. Use something like V0 or hook into OpenAI's function calling with clear constraints. And if you're further along, maybe you can build your context engine that powers this conditional rendering. You don't need, as I said, LLM in production to start testing whether dynamic UI proves or improves this task completion or reduces the user drop-off or not. It can be like completely based on simple tools. And I think Thesis is also a great tool that you can start with. They have two product lines. One is C1 and Canvas. I think you can start with that. It's very intuitive and it's very product managers, product designers, or engineers focused. Everybody who is in this space loves this. So coming back to Gen UI, the key to treat just like a product loop and not a tech experiment or a tech revolution that you need to do. So the question is, can we generate this with UI? That's all. That's a simple question. If the answer is yes, apply Gen UI.
Okay. The question I want to ask you most now is the design and development process, how it is evolving, especially in terms of collaboration between product design and engineering. How is the designer to developer handoff going to get affected? So because we work with teams, and I want to know how it is going to change.
Yeah, I get this question a lot. And I would say, see, Gen UI is also bringing the shift in how we are thinking about interfaces. But to support that, even as a collaboration or teams level also, we need to bring that shift. So I would say Gen UI is bringing shift at a multiple levels. And I would say it's a mindset shift. So what's evolving the most isn't just how we build it. Now it's how we decide what gets built and who will be responsible for designing or shaping it. So for example, in traditional model, you had clean handoffs from product team to design to engineering team. Like product team will define the flows, design will basically own the screens, and engineering will basically write the code. But when the interface itself is very dynamic, when it changes based on the context and the intent, these boundaries also dilute. So you're no longer handing off the wireframes. What you're handing off between teams is the logic. And now that demands also a shared ownership. So everybody owns this logic. Designers will not just design the layouts anymore. They are defining the intent-driven components. And product teams now are responsible for modeling these design decision rules. What adapts, how it stays fixed, what are in which are conditions it will stay like that, what are our fail safes, all these questions product teams are responsible for, whereas engineering team, they basically connect these models in real time for signals that powers this UI generation. So everybody is basically working on the same design system. That means the coordination overhead goes up, but so does the opportunity to make the software actually feel more and more intelligent. And this is where the context modeling also is very, very important. It goes deeper into the teams now. What signals we need to track? Which ones are the trustworthy ones? How do we prevent this interface from becoming unpredictable? So GenUI forces teams from stop working in layers and start to working in loops. And one loop that we have seen so far is from design to build to ship is no longer there anymore. Now the new loops that are coming in place is define, generate, observe, and refine. That's the loop that we need to apply when we are thinking about GenUI.
Okay, so Khyati, since this process is evolving, how do we keep the process ethical and transparent, for GenUI, and make sure that we, really do not manipulate the user behavior?
So I think ethical or ethics is a very, very large topic. And it will take very long time for me also to explain. But to summarize, I would say the most important thing and most overlooked question in GenUI is basically ethics, and every team has to be very, very mindful about when they are trying to implement GenUI. So because the moment the interface starts adapting based on signals, you are no longer just designing the experiences. What you're designing is influence. And personalization becomes manipulation in the moment the system stops explaining itself. So I use a simple 5-point framework that to think about ethics in GenUI, and not just for users but also for the teams who are building it. The first important rule is transparency. Can the user see what changed and why? And even small flags like this view was adapted based on your recent activity helps the interface to be honest and not intrusive. The second one is user autonomy. Can the user override what the system is doing? If they can't undo the suggestion or pin their layout or opt out of this personalization, it's not adaptive. It's basically controlling. Third one is the intent alignment. Is the system working for the user or pushing for the business goal that we are trying to do? Hey, I know you're trying to do this, but just do this. We want you to do this. So let's stop that. We have to be honest with what we are optimizing for. If the system is prioritizing engagement over the user goals, that's a conflict. And then it will also show in the user behavior. And last and the most important piece is the explainability and auditability. Can the team trace and explain what happened and why? If no one in the product team can tell why interface changed in certain scenario, that's a design failure there, not the logic bug. Then you're not fixing the bugs. So that's what I always say. This is the framework that I think we should think about when we are talking about ethical GenUI. So a good system adapts, but a great one earns the permission first and explain it along the way. That's how we should always think about GenUI.
Very, very well said, Khyati. So, if the process of GenUI, design as well as development, I realize that it might blur the line between, the user and the user and the designer. So, who is in control? Is it the machine or the algorithm or the user?
So I would say the machine is giving the baseline to the user, but user will always be in control. Without user's feedback or intent, the whatever system is generating is basically a guideline. Think of it like that.
Correct. So one last question, Khyati. Based on your experience and your journey with design and generative UI, first we had normal static interfaces, then we had responsive UI, then we had adaptive UI, and now the Gen UI. So your journey with this design and generative UI, can you talk about what can we look forward to in the future with this?
So yeah, for Gen UI, I think we are just getting started. There is a long way for everybody to go from here. And I see the adoption in the industry already. A lot of companies, a lot of teams are already implementing Gen UI. in different use cases and in different domains also. Some are implementing it in like chatbots. Some are already implementing in the web applications or SaaS applications, mobile applications, and going forward, it will be also towards the enterprise applications also. But the real adoption will come when bigger companies like Google also recently launched many really good features that will basically support this multimodal interfaces. So going forward, the future is when Gen UI, voice AI, and the agentic AI is working all together. So think of it like when you're talking to the chatbot or a AI, you are also giving them instructions. It is basically responding you with generative UI, only the things that you need to enter or do things on the interface, and then it is taking actions on behalf of you. So that's what I say. That's where I think the future is headed, where all these different technologies would basically come together and the multi-modal interfaces will come into the surface.
All right, that was great. That was a great answer, Kathy. And well, Gen UI is quite exciting, and we look forward to a great future with generative UI. Well, that brings us to the end of this podcast. Thank you so much, Kathy. It has been wonderful talking to you, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Kirti.
Kathy, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show today. Your insights, experiences, and perspectives have truly added immense value to this conversation. I am sure our listeners are walking away more inspired and more informed today. Thank you once again for joining us. And to our audience, thank you for tuning in. Stay curious, keep learning, and we'll see you in the next episode of Why Involve podcast.